Nike told Allyson Felix she was worth 70% less the moment she got pregnant. She said no, and then she told the world. That was May 2019. Felix was 33 years old, a 6-time Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most decorated track and field athletes in American history. She had spent years as the face of Nike's women's running campaigns, and when her contract came up for renegotiation, after she had survived a premature birth, a life-threatening delivery, and a recovery that almost ended her career, the offer on the table was a 70% pay reduction, contingent on her performance during pregnancy and the months after birth. She didn't take the deal, and she didn't stay quiet about why. If you've never heard this story in full, stay with me. Because what happened after Allyson Felix went public didn't just affect her. It changed the terms every pregnant athlete was offered by one of the most powerful sports companies in the world. Subscribe if this is new to you. 2. Women's sports has a paper trail, and I'm going to follow it. In November 2018, Allyson Felix's daughter Cameron was born at 32 weeks. Felix had developed severe preeclampsia, a dangerous pregnancy complication that causes dangerously high blood pressure and can be fatal for both mother and child. The delivery was an emergency C-section. Cameron spent weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. Felix has spoken publicly about the fear she felt during those weeks, not just as an athlete, but as a mother who didn't know if her daughter would survive. Then she got pregnant. She recovered. She returned to training. She prepared to run again. And it was in that context, having just delivered a premature infant, having just survived a medical emergency, having just begun the long process of rebuilding an Olympic body, that she sat across from Nike's representatives and was told what she was worth now that she was a mother. The number was 70% of her previous contract value. On May 22, 2019, Allyson Felix published an op-ed in the New York Times. She did not do it anonymously. She did not hedge or soften. She named Nike directly. She described exactly what the company had proposed, and she wrote, in clear, plain terms, that she refused to sign because the contract offered no protection against having her pay reduced if her performance declined during pregnancy or in the months after giving birth. She wrote, "I asked Nike to guarantee that I wouldn't be penalized if my performance declined due to pregnancy." Nike's response, per her account, was that they couldn't make that commitment. She also wrote about what she saw behind that offer, not just a financial decision, but a statement about how the sports industry valued female athletes once they stepped outside the narrow performance window. An athlete who was pregnant was not, in the industry's calculus, an athlete who was working. She was a liability. Felix saw it differently. She saw it as the moment she had to decide whether she was going to accept the logic or reject it publicly. That op-ed went everywhere. Within days, Nike released a public statement confirming that it had changed its maternity policy for sponsored athletes. The new policy, announced in May 2019, stated that Nike would not reduce the pay or bonuses of an athlete for 18 months surrounding pregnancy. That protection was not limited to Felix. It applied to every woman Nike sponsored. One athlete's refusal to sign one contract became a binding policy change that covered the entire roster. Felix did not return to Nike. By the time the policy was announced, she had already made her decision. She signed with Athleta, the women's athletic brand owned by Gap Inc., becoming the first athlete the brand had ever signed as a full sponsorship partner. The message of that move was impossible to misread. There was a version of athlete sponsorship that didn't ask women to choose between motherhood and their career, and she was going to represent it. Then she went back to work. The Tokyo Olympics in 2021 were supposed to happen in 2020. They were delayed by the pandemic. When they finally took place, Felix ran in 2 events. She finished 3rd in the 400 meters, earning a bronze medal. She anchored the U.S. 400-meter relay team, which won gold. In doing so, she surpassed Carl Lewis's record for the most Olympic medals won by an American track and field athlete. 11 medals, 6 gold, 3 silver, 2 bronze, the most in U.S. track and field history. She ran those races as a mother. She ran them as someone who had refused a contract. She ran them sponsored by a brand she had chosen on her own terms. Felix announced her retirement in February 2022. Her final professional race took place in Eugene, Oregon in July 2022 at the World Athletics Championships in front of a crowd that understood they were watching something end. She crossed the line in the 4:04 relay and the U.S. team finished fourth. The performance didn't matter. What mattered was that she was there, still running, still competing, on a contract that reflected what she believed she was worth. In 2019, the same year her op-ed ran, Felix testified before the United States Congress on maternal mortality, a crisis disproportionately affecting Black women in America. Her daughter's premature birth and the medical emergency surrounding it had made her acutely aware of how the health system failed pregnant women who weren't white, weren't wealthy, and weren't famous. She used her platform to make that argument in a congressional hearing room on the record in the same year she was fighting Nike. The two things, the contract and the testimony, weren't separate issues. They were the same argument from two different angles. An athlete's body, once it becomes pregnant, is treated as less valuable. Felix disagreed, and she spent a year making that disagreement as visible as possible. Here is what this story means beyond the headline. Nike's maternity policy change was not the product of a lawsuit, a regulatory action, or a federal mandate. It was the product of one athlete choosing to describe her contract in a newspaper. The company had the resources to fight the narrative if it chose to. It didn't, because the mathematics of the reputational cost made capitulation the better option. That is how the leverage worked. Not through courts, not through collective bargaining, but through the specific combination of a credible athlete, a respected platform, and the specific visibility that comes from naming a number, 70%. Numbers matter in these stories. Nike tried to devalue me during pregnancy is a claim that can be managed. Nike offered me 70% of my previous salary when I got pregnant, is a number that puts what was abstract into something that every woman who has ever been passed over, underpaid, or managed out of a position after having a child can feel viscerally. That is what Allyson Felix understood. The story needed a number to make it real. She gave them one. She ran 11 Olympic races across 5 games. She won 11 medals. She changed one policy. And she chose, at the moment when the industry expected her to negotiate quietly and sign, to make the private terms of that negotiation a matter of public record. The industry has not been the same since, and neither has the conversation about what it means to be a female athlete with a body that can do something a male athlete's cannot. If that story matters to you, look at what's on your screen right now. There is another video waiting. Click it.